It's a cold, rainy November night a couple years ago. My friend Matthew had invited me to stay over at his house for the weekend since it was his birthday. Both of his parents would be gone for the weekend, so since they couldn't be there for his birthday, they bought him a brand new Xbox One S, couple of games, and permission to have a friend stay over for the weekend. Now, Matthew had been one of my closest friends for roughly 10 years, after being on the same t-ball team. I arrived just as dusk was approaching. Matthew's parents left us a note that said there will be a person coming over to set up the padlocks on our house's doors, and enough money for us to last the weekend. It started off generic talk to eat pizza, video games, etc. Things were dulling down, and it was getting to be around 3 a.m.-ish. Right across his house was a local park. Matthew gets an idea to go to the park and just chill out to see what life was like when everybody was asleep. After playing nothing but MLB for 6 hours straight, it seemed like a good opportunity to take a break. Matt lived in a very secret location in his neighborhood, but the closest houses were across the street and one next door. We go outside, not really dressed for the weather, thinking that it would only be out for a little, and start to walk over to the park. By now it's raining, and the rain starts to become a nuisance, and the thunder was just loud and annoying. But he seemed to enjoy it, and if he enjoyed it, I was going to enjoy it. Halfway across the street, we see a shadowy figure sitting alone on a park bench under a light pole. He does a double take on us and slowly rises from the bench. He slowly turns 180 degrees clockwise and stares at nothing but us. This man didn't look familiar. I've been in Matt's neighborhood enough to know that this man wasn't from here. We stand like statues, and all of a sudden he starts to walk over to us. He didn't run, he just slowly walked over. We backpedaled to his door while keeping a sharp eye on the mysterious man. We arrive at his porch. By seeing the look on Matt's face, his blood ran cold. The door would have a 6-digit passcode on it that Matt was never given. The man was roughly 300 feet away. Matt's vigorously punching in possible 6-digit codes. His zip code, incorrect. His birthday, incorrect. His parents' birthdays, incorrect. Hell, he even put his dog's birthday, but it was no use. We thought of calling the police, but we left our phone in his basement. The man was about 200 feet away now. A subtle laughter could be heard from the stranger. He was a fucking psycho. As he got closer to us, we had no choice. We had to get to his neighbor's house ASAP. We couldn't get to the neighbor's house across the street because there was no way we were going to take a chance in crossing paths with that lunatic. So we resort to his neighbor right next to him. We rang the doorbell multiple times. No answer. Checked the garage window if there were any cars home. There were none to be found. They were gone. The man was less than 100 feet away now. We were running out of options. We make a break for the woods in his backyard. Before we left, I take a look at the man. Lightning strikes, which gave me enough time to observe the stranger. He seemed to be in his mid to late 40s, 5'10", decently in shape, but that's not the weird part. He had white powder all over his face, almost as if he was a clown. He had bloodshot eyes and a sadistic smile. That was enough a reason for me to get out of there. Matt had been much faster than me, so the longer we ran to the forest, the further he got away. He had been running for about 5 minutes into his deep woods, and at this point, I had no idea where Matthew had gone. I could not hear or see him. I was all alone. As I stopped to catch my breath, I stumbled upon an old abandoned shed. One side had completely been gone from the eroding of the wood. The shed had been covered in moss. Luckily, God was on my side for this one. There was a flashlight, some old boots, and a rusty old lead pipe inside the shed. I clicked the flashlight, but there was no light. I checked the battery compartment, and there was no battery. Fuck. It would have been too good to be true. As I'm examining my rusty lead pipe, I hear a sticks and twigs snap in the distance. No doubt it was coming my way. I get behind the shed with my pipe, preparing for the man to come. I listen to the snapping of the twigs and branches. Time to swing. I could tell he was right next to me from the heavy breathing that he was doing. I take one forceful swing. It lands perfectly on his forehead. He falls down to the ground with force. As I check the body, I realize it was not the stranger. It was Matthew. I kneel down to him, hoping he wasn't dead, but thank God he wasn't, only unconscious. The only way me and Matthew were going to get out of this situation was if we make a beeline out of the woods and back to his house. I hear his leaves rustling, but they weren't too close to us. There wasn't any way that I could carry Matthew and outrun the stranger at the same time. I had to act fast, so I covered Matthew in leaves as best and quietly as possible. I finished covering Matthew in leaves, then I turned around, and the stranger was no more than 10 feet away from me, just standing there with his fucking grin. I didn't want the stranger to see Matthew's body in the leaves, so I try and get all of his attention on me. "What do you want from me?" I yelled. The man gave no reply. The man had no weapons on him, so I tried to threaten him with my lead pipe and tell him that if he doesn't get out of here, I will beat the shit out of him. Still, no reply. I gradually walk up to the man, trying to sound as intimidating as possible. I take a hack at his head, but he instantly grabs onto my arm. Before I could land the swing, he squeezes my arm to the point where I feel the bone might snap. He shoved me into the shed wall and choked me. As a last result, I kicked him in the balls and grabbed the broken bottle from the ground and shoved it straight into his stomach, and I ran off. He showed no motion or pain. As I'm running, I look back for the first time, and he was just casually walking. Second time I looked back, he was speed walking. Third time, it was a jog. And the last time I looked back, he was full on sprinting. As I get close and closer to out of the woods, I can see flashing red and blue sirens. This was it. Finally, some help. I go to the cop car, gasping for air, and I looked into the woods, and the man was gone. Matthew's neighbor across the street were there, and said they called the cops when saying they saw me and Matthew run into the woods after being followed by an unknown man. I lead a small group of police officers into the woods to retrieve Matthew and find the man. After the police conducted a thorough investigation of the woods, they came to the conclusion that the man was no longer there. So I take them to the shed where I buried Matthew in the leaves, and I go to where he put him, and there is nothing but an indentation of where his head was resting. He was gone. Matthew was gone. An Amber Alert was sent out that same night. To this day, Matthew has yet to be found, and the only person who is to blame for his disappearance is me.